Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today we're diving into 3 stories that are buzzing online. We begin in Gaza, where the largest flare-up of violence between Hamas and Israel since the 2014 Gaza War appears to be over. People on social media have been talking about the news using hashtags Gaza and Gaza under attack.
On Wednesday, Hamas announced that armed groups in the Gaza Strip had agreed to a ceasefire with Israel. The news followed a night of air attacks on Tuesday by Israel aimed at several Hamas and Islamic Jihad positions. Joining us to talk about this, we have Harry Fawcett. He's a senior correspondent with Al Jazeera English. He's covering the story for our network. And Farah Baker is a student and social media activist in Gaza. Harry, Farah, it's good to have you here. Harry, this ceasefire, what's going on right now?
Well, it's been pretty quiet since the ceasefire, essentially informal ceasefire, came into effect at 4 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Israel contends that it hasn't signed up to any ceasefire. It is pretty clear, though, that Egypt was extremely keen to ensure that things didn't spin further out of control. Egypt has been trying to broker a peace deal between Israel and Hamas for some time. It's also been trying to sponsor reconciliation between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. It's very keen to make sure that there isn't any further security breakdown on its northern border. And so for now, things remain pretty calm. I think both sides as well are very clear about the dangers of further escalation. I think there was pretty careful calibration of just how far to push things on both the Israeli and the Gazan sides.
You know, I hear that, Harry, and online people are echoing what you're saying about things being calm right now. But as of last night, Wednesday night, this is what May tweeted us. She says, unfortunately, the situation in Gaza is now very suspicious. The sounds of the Israeli reconnaissance planes continue to fly intensely and frighteningly. In addition to cutting off the electricity, it's been a dark night for Gazans. We are still scared. Then this morning, Thursday morning, Abdurrahim tweets in, I heard no explosions today. I think it's being respected at the moment. Only the sounds of Israeli drones and warplanes are heard flying in our sky. You won't understand how terrifying these sounds are until you witness what he calls a genocide. Farah, for you, hearing these 2 accounts of people who are in Gaza, can you relate to them? What have the last few days been like for you?
Actually, since we've been hearing a lot of bombs, we were so worried that this will turn into an aggression, as the aggression of 2014 started like this. It began with the clashes, and then it turned into an aggression. And the sound of the bombs and the Zionist airplanes and the drones were too terrifying and too annoying, especially the Israeli drones. And actually, people in Gaza became like psychologically sick that when we hear a car passing quickly in the street or someone shuts the door too strongly, we think that these are either a rocket falling or this is an explosion. So we became like, our lives, like we became used to explosion sound.
Harry, the last time we saw you reporting on Al Jazeera, you were reporting from a hospital. Can you tell us more about the stories that you heard while you were there?
Well, yeah, I think this is actually a very important aspect to the story, not just the clashes that we saw this week, which actually resulted in no casualties on this side and a few injuries on the Israeli side, but the story of the last 2 months, these protests along the fence that separates Israel and Gaza, and the vast number of casualties that we've been seeing. The International Committee of the Red Cross put out an appeal today for funding, more than $5 million worth of funding. They want to double their surgical teams here because of not the immediate inflow of injuries, but the long-term consequences of those injuries. 3,600 injured by live fire. Of those, 1,300, we're told, need 4 or 5 operations over the course of the next 6 months or so. So as well as that, we're going to see disabilities for many of them extending throughout their lives. And so all of this, as difficult as it is to manage for the hospitals, also pushes aside all of the regular medical care work that would otherwise be going on. And that's something that the director of UNRWA, the UN agency, which has so much to do here in Gaza in terms of looking after the 1 million Palestine refugees that it looks after, they are talking about a crisis in healthcare as well. So of all the deepening concerns, that's one of the major ones at the moment.
Harry, keeping that in mind, Sarah Rashid here tweets in, my question would be, how long will this ceasefire last? The ceasefires do little to help with the overwhelming food and medical supply shortages in Gaza. Whether people want to recognize it or not, Gaza is essentially an outdoor prison for Palestinians. Being at that hospital this week, Harry, what stood out to you the most? What did you find most striking?
Well, I think it is the fact that these people will be coming back and back and back for more and more medical care. And for some of them, it will be, we've already seen a large number of amputations as well. These are life-changing injuries. I was there in the operating theater speaking to an ICRC surgeon, and he was having to sort of rootle around inside the ankle of this young man who'd been shot several weeks ago, looking for bone fragments that had been left behind, presumably in the rush, because of the sheer pressure of numbers. And it doesn't just go to what's happening in the medical sector. I mean, I've been Jerusalem correspondent for just over a year now, so I've been coming here very regularly, and it was bad when I started coming here, and it has been getting steadily worse. The crackdown by the Palestinian Authority on Hamas, trying to squeeze Hamas by placing restrictions on payments and on electricity and so on, that's been having severe effects on people who've been forced out of homes, forced to live with relatives, sometimes forced onto the street. And what you hear from people is this feeling that all of their leaders, Hamas, Palestinian Authority, and indeed, of course, Israel on the other side of the blockade, are treating them with cynicism, and they've lost faith, and they just want some kind of change, some kind of attempt to live in dignity. And that's what a lot of them say that the protests over the last couple of months have been about.
Flotilla, I see you nodding. What's going on behind that nod?
Actually, I just want to talk about the march, the Great Return of March, that we should all remember that all the marchers were unarmed and went to peacefully march to return to their occupied territories in 1948. But the Zionist occupation, in response, shot them, and many casualties of amputation of limbs. And this thing will change all of people's lives and the circumstances that we live through, that everything around us makes us more depressed, like the deduction of the salaries by the Palestinian Authority, the blockade, we have no access to the outside world, the polluted water, the electricity outage, and the increased poverty rate and unemployment rate, and the increased child labor. And a lot of companies can't do their work, so they're laying off their employees. So poverty rate is increasing rapidly.
Farah, you just summed up in about 30 seconds some of the major issues that Palestinians have when they're living inside of Gaza. Thank you, Farah. Thank you, Harry, for the latest from Gaza. We appreciate you being on the stream today.
Now to the United Kingdom, where people online are discussing if Northern Ireland will decriminalize abortion following the Republic of Ireland's historic vote. Here to discuss what's next for Northern Ireland, Kelly O'Dowd. She's the co-chair for Alliance for Choice. And activist Ashley Topley. Welcome to you both. Ashley, I want to start with some action on the streets via this headline here from The Independent on my laptop. Northern Irish women protesting anti-abortion laws take illegal termination pills in front of police. And there's a video, and you can see pictures of that all over Twitter today. Now, online, this is the reaction. Rebecca tweets into the stream, you shouldn't have less reproductive choices because you were born in Derry and not Durham, or Belfast and not Birmingham. It's time to decriminalize abortion and give women in Northern Ireland autonomy over their own bodies, equality with sisters in England, Scotland, and Wales. When you see pictures of these protests, when you read solidarity tweets like this, do they resonate with you?
Oh, totally. Just to give you an idea of what my experience was, 4 years ago, I found out that I was pregnant with my first child, a very much wanted baby. And the pregnancy went as normal up until the 20-week scan, when we were told that, I'm sorry, but your baby's not going to survive. At that stage, I asked for a termination, and I was told that just doesn't happen here. So I had to go until I was 35 weeks pregnant when my waters broke and deliver a stillborn baby. That's the situation currently, and women who are pregnant, people who are pregnant as a result of sexual crime, can't access a termination either, nor can those who have a crisis pregnancy.
Kelly, I'm just looking at a tweet here from the UK Prime Minister Theresa May. It says here, the Irish referendum yesterday, so this was tweeted out on the 27th of May, was an impressive show of democracy which delivered a clear and unambiguous result. I congratulate the Irish people on their decision and all of the Together for Yes on their successful campaign. PM Theresa May, #repealed the 8th. So her position is very clear when it comes to Ireland. But what about Northern Ireland? How are the politicians stacking up on the northern side of the border?
Well, unfortunately, we haven't had a government in terms of the Northern Ireland Assembly for 17 months now. So we have asked Theresa May to legislate. The 1967 Abortion Act has never been implemented in Northern Ireland, even though we're citizens of the United Kingdom. So we are asking her now to legislate. Our human rights are not a devolved matter to the Northern Ireland Assembly, even if it came back tomorrow. So it's under UK legislation, really, to help deliver human rights for women in Northern Ireland. Around this time, we have around 800 plus women who travel from Northern Ireland to England and beyond to access abortions. That's okay if you're able to travel, but there's so many women who can't. So if you're an undocumented migrant, if you have a disability, if you're in a coercive control relationship, if you don't have a passport or other documents, if you're under 16, for example. So a lot of people can't travel. A lot of people haven't been out of Northern Ireland, never mind traveling to a strange country to access their reproductive health care. And also we have a situation where women are accessing abortion pills, which you showed earlier. Abortion pills ordered online from Women on Waves and Women Help Women are safe abortion pills, but they are illegal. So women are putting their liberty at are risking being imprisoned because they're accessing abortion pills. And that's happened 3 times in Northern Ireland so far. So we had 3 cases of people being prosecuted for accessing abortion pills online.
You know, Chris here on Twitter, Chris Henry says, in regard to Northern Ireland, it's been shown clearly in the past week that Theresa May has no intention of providing choice to Northern Irish women propped up by the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, as it is, which leaves the people in Northern Ireland one real choice: protest, organize, agitate. Ashley, do you see that as your choice?
Well, we have been doing that for years and years and years, and Kelly has been doing it a lot longer than I have. We have been protesting. We have been trying to organise as many things as we can to educate people on what the situation is really like here. But it is, you know, we are grateful for the result in the Irish referendum, because it has really shone the spotlight even further onto Northern Ireland. And Theresa May does have a choice. She can legislate because, as Kelly rightly said, human rights are not a devolved matter. So she has the power to take action right now, but she won't because of the coalition with DUP. But we're going to shout about that as much as we can.
Kelly and Ashley, I'm sensing a sense of momentum that's come from Ireland. Jody here, for instance, on Twitter says, this campaign isn't over until our brothers and sisters up north have the right to choose also. So there may be momentum, there may be some pressure, there may be some enthusiasm. But in terms of policy and political change, Kelly, is there anything that's about to happen that would change abortion laws for Northern Ireland?
There's a number of things. So if you look at our statutes, we have the 1861 Yes, I repeat, the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act, still in our statutes. So that's before the light bulb was invented. Theresa May can take away section 58 and 59 of that piece of legislation. It stops women being criminalised and it stops healthcare professionals being criminalised. We also have a domestic violence piece of legislation that's going through Westminster at the minute, and they're trying to tag on abortion legislation for Northern Ireland. We need to decriminalise abortion in Northern Ireland. We need to make it free, safe and legal. We need to provide reproductive healthcare for our sisters and pregnant people at home as soon as possible.
Rebecca here says, saying the North is next is great in theory, but in practice, the politicians are way behind the people on this in Northern Ireland. We need actions, not words, and full decriminalization of abortion. And none of the 5 major parties support this. We need to lobby and to fight for abortion access in Northern Ireland. I'm wondering, Kelly or Ashley, where do doctors stand on this?
Well, in my personal... Sorry, Kelly, you go ahead.
No, Ashley, you go.
Well, just in my personal experience, when I was denied an abortion, my doctor, I saw a number of doctors, but my main consultant told me that he was sorry, but his hands were tied. At the minute, if doctors help a pregnant person have an abortion, they can risk losing their license for a start and being prosecuted and going to jail. So doctors can't help women and pregnant people even if they want to. And not only that, but they can't even give them directions as to how to get the help that they want and that they need. How, because we can travel to England. We shouldn't have to, but we can do that. But the pregnant person, has to organise that and find all that information all by themselves. And when you're facing a crisis pregnancy or a fatal fetal abnormality diagnosis, the last thing that you have the headspace to do is try to organise flights, organise accommodation, try and find some healthcare or a place where you can actually have a termination.
You're hearing the words of Ashley Topley. You also heard from Kelly O'Dowd. I'll end with this via YouTube. Elizabeth says, I love that their shirts say trust women. That sums up perfectly why women should have a choice. Thank you for joining us on this issue.
We head to the United States, where social media exploded recently over news about the treatment of migrant children being held by authorities at the Mexican border. Twitter users began calling for action with the hashtags Where Are the Children and Missing Children after reports circulated that youngsters were being separated from their migrant parents and that the government had lost track of almost 1,500 of them. But, as some on social have pointed out, this is a complicated issue. Joining us to talk about this in Tijuana, Mexico, Erica Pinheiro. She is the Policy and Litigation Director for Al Auto Lado. Welcome. It's good to have you here, Erica. Let me just start with a little bit of a statement from the Department of Health and Human Services, because there was such an uproar about missing children. So this is what Eric Hagen says. These children, they're not lost. They're sponsors who are usually parents or family members, and in all of the cases, they have been vetted for criminality and ability to provide for them. And then he goes on to say, simply did not respond or could not be reached when this voluntary call was made. So the children are not lost. Erica?
Yeah, that's correct. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement releases most children to close family members or parents. And they do a follow-up call about a month after release. And so exactly what the HHS representative said is absolutely correct. The sponsors simply didn't respond to the phone call. The issue really is that ORR, especially recently, is sharing information with ICE. So whereas before a sponsor could be undocumented and receive a child and might feel more comfortable responding to a follow-up call, now the Trump administration has made it so that ORR is sharing information about undocumented sponsors with ICE, is keeping track of children and reporting their whereabouts to ICE. And so I think what we're going to see is actually more children that the Department of Health and Human Services will be unable to reach. And this is problematic because they have put in safeguards to make sure that children are being released to sponsors that are going to treat them well, but that's not always the case. And so I think that there needs to be some kind of safeguard where a child who's in a trafficking situation or a child who is being abused feels comfortable reaching back out to the Office of Refugee Resettlement or another child welfare agency without fear that they will be turned over to ICE if they do so.
Okay, and Erica, for our international audience, ORR is an acronym for Office of Refugee Resettlement.
That's correct.
Picking up on what you said there, Kaz here on Twitter sent us a chain of tweets, and in it she says, as a lawyer on Twitter pointed out, given the current close cooperation between ICE and HHS, which is the Health and Human Services, we probably don't want our government keeping close tabs on these kids and their families anyway. It would only lead to more deportations of those who are the most vulnerable. But she goes on to say, I think it's important to note that the real tragedy is not missing children. It's the inhumane policy of separating children from their parents at the border. It's placing young children and babies in detention facilities to punish asylum seekers. Erica, can you talk to us about this part of the policy? Because I know that you work directly with people on the border giving legal aid. What have you seen?
So since November, we've seen about, I've helped about a dozen families who've been separated at the border by ICE or by Customs and Border Protection. So these are families who are approaching a legal port of entry. They're asking CBP, Customs and Border Protection, for asylum and then being separated from their children. So the parents are being sent to an ICE detention facility and the children being sent to OR custody. It's incredibly traumatic for these families. And when we warn people on the Mexican side that they could potentially be separated from their children, many of them are willing to take that risk because they fear losing their lives if they don't access the U.S. asylum system. So we're putting these families in this incredible position to essentially choose between their lives and their children. And most of the parents, they're willing to sacrifice themselves to give their children a better life. But it's absolutely not a policy that the United States should be implementing.
Yeah, and this has turned into a huge political fight. Let me give you a little clip of a conversation between the California Senator Kamala Harris and the Department of Homeland Secretary. Have a listen.
Your agency will be separating children from their parents. And
no,
I would assume
what we'll be doing is prosecuting parents who've broken the law, just as we do every day in the United States of America.
I can appreciate that. But if that parent has a 4-year-old child, what do you plan on doing with that child?
The child under law goes to HHS for care and custody.
They will be separated from their parent.
Just
and
like
so my
we do in the
question-
United States every day.
So they will be separated from their parent. And my question then is, when you are separating children from their parents, do you have a protocol in place about how that should be done? And are you training the people who will actually remove a child from their parent on how to do that in the least traumatic way? I would hope you do train on how to do that. And so the question is, and the request has been, to give us the information about how you are training and what the protocols are for separating a child from their parent.
I'm happy to provide you with the training information.
Thank you.
So that was the Department of Homeland Security Secretary being questioned there. Erica, one of the things that your organisation does is try and find families that have been separated, try and find the children, get them back together. Would you describe what it is like for the families when they are separated? What happens?
Yeah, so the immigration agents physically rip children from their parents' arms, screaming children who don't have any idea what's going on. You have to understand that these agents often have guns on them. They're uniformed. I mean, it's such an incredibly traumatizing event that both parents and children have told me that I'll never be the same after experiencing that. The youngest client I've had separated from his father actually is 18 months old. He was in OR custody for 2 months before being released to another family member. And his mother tells me, I got a different child back. He's afraid to be out of my sight. He's afraid that the police are going to take him. Another 5-year-old girl is, now having nightmares and trouble in school now that she's been released to her mother. And so it's something that, if they're training people on how to do it, if they're training agents on how to do this in a less traumatic way, I'm certainly not seeing this on the ground. And the other issue I want to address is that the secretary is saying that they're only separating children from parents who are not crossing at a normal port of entry. So those who are crossing illegally. That's simply not true. They're separating children from parents who are prosecuted, but also from those who are seeking asylum legally at a port of entry. So Yeah.
I hear you. Erica Pinheiro, thank you so much for joining us and also shedding light and truth and facts on a conversation that blew up on Twitter with some misinformation. It's really helpful for you to be on the stream. Thank you to all of our guests and our community. Malika and I will see you always online. Thanks for watching.